And thank you everyone for showing up. I'm so honored. I hope you're all doing well and staying healthy. It is a crazy time that we're living in, so I hope you're taking care of yourselves. At least NCSU was still able to bring me into your lives, so a complete stranger in your living room, the magic of technology. All jokes aside, I am extremely honored to be tapped as this year's keynote speaker for NCSU's APIDA Heritage Month. I would have loved to speak to you all in person. I've never visited your campus, so I think that would have been such a treat. But hopefully tonight's Zoom session is still going to leave you with some new inspiration. I will confess that I wrote this speech and prepared it expecting to give it in person, so I apologize if beforehand if it comes off a little bit stilted or stiff. I'll try to add some flavor for the webcam. But as my lovely introducing people, Sarah and Marcella, said, my name is Amy. I am the co-founder and director of a small nonprofit based in Denver, Colorado called Adopteen. I founded Adopteen in 2007 with my twin brother out of a very simple desire to build a space for a community that we cared deeply about. We were juniors in high school, and when we first started Adopteen, our mission for Adopteen was to build a space for teenage adoptees to connect, celebrate, and inspire each other without adult interference, and to take pride in the past, present, and future. That was literally what we put in our original website, without adult interference. We were angsty teenagers and determined to make the world a better place, and what were adults doing if not just interfering? Our first event was a 3-day conference and was attended by 32 teenagers from across the country, all adopted and all with no clue about what their parents had signed them up for. I'm pretty sure you could see the skid marks of their sneakers in the parking lot as their parents dragged them in that first time. Before I get much further, I do need to clarify that I am not adopted. I am not here to speak on behalf of the adopted population. It's a common mistake. You see, my parents are the co-founders of the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world, founded in 1992. And that is the world that my brother and I grew up in, and my sister later. When we were young, it's not a stretch to say that we knew more adoptive families than normal traditional families. It wasn't something that I thought about until much later, when I realized that the majority of my peers knew nothing about adoption, and that most families viewed adoption as a lesser option for family building. It blew my mind. I'll circle back to Adopteen in a bit, as it is APIDA's Heritage Month. I want to give a bit more information about my background. My parents immigrated to the United States in 1986, and I am a first-generation Chinese American, born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I spent my college and post-college years in Seattle, Washington, where I grew leaps and bounds in my self-acceptance as an Asian American, before moving back to Colorado to run Adopteen full-time in 2013. Growing up around international adoption, I do feel that I developed a very unique understanding of my place as a Chinese American, and that's probably why Sarah invited me for our Stories Unraveled. Thank you, Sarah. Looking back, I never fully appreciated how unique of a lens it was, but here I am now, fully appreciating it. Like any typical first gen in central United States, I imagine, my childhood was a balancing act between family culture and Americana, constantly trying to reconcile the two while the world diligently tried to keep them apart. It was a strange, drawn-out game of hypocrisy where I dreaded any time my parents asked me to bring homemade dumplings to school lunch, or I blasted Lauryn Hill or NSYNC or Mariah Carey whenever my parents started playing Chinese music. I was also always the first one on the couch to catch the latest episode of our family's favorite Chinese drama. Being what felt like the only immigrant household in white America, not true, but what felt like it, did not lend itself to many family friends. I'm not talking about personal friends. I had plenty of those. I mean, come on, Chinese twins. The Zhong twins were the talk of the town. No, I'm talking more about the family friends that come over for all-night dinner parties or family camping trips. You know, the ones that your parents bring over to catch up on the latest gossip heard over the grapevine while sipping on grape wine. You know, friends. We didn't have those. It was just us. My earliest memory is from preschool. When the volunteer mom who did drop-offs and the preschool teacher called me a precious China doll. I remember feeling annoyed, little 3-year-old me all huffy. I obviously knew that I was Chinese, but more than that, I was adamant that I didn't like dolls. You know, that's actually a lie. That's not my first memory. My first memory is of a girl in class named Samantha who ate glue, but that's not relevant. You know, she would just pour it all over the desk and spread it around with her hands and wait for it to dry, and then eat it like chips. It really left a big impression on me. I remember thinking, is that why her skin is so white? No, I'm totally kidding. That would be horrible. Can you imagine? Like skin bleaching brought to you by Elmer's glue. Anyway, China doll. It's really weird because there's no audience, so hopefully that one's okay. Anyway, China doll. Among my earliest memories. Another memory is from kindergarten. It must have been kindergarten. We were learning our colors. You know, the teacher would point to a color and say it, and you would repeat it. Red, red, blue, blue, chartreuse, chartreuse. When we got to white, I said white. She looked at me and kept repeating, white, 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 white. She was so irritated and just looked at me and asked, sweetheart, did your parents teach you to say white like that? I shook my head, and I remember a kid in class named Derek said her parents can't speak English, which was then followed by a healthy burst of giggles from the class. To be clear, I have many friends now whose parents don't speak much English, and I love that, and that is their story to tell, but my parents could speak English. My dad was an English professor in China before he immigrated. Now, this was in kindergarten, and I know that Derek felt bad after saying it, but I remember that feeling that would later feel too familiar. That awful mix of embarrassment and anger that makes your face turn red and that hot heat in your stomach burn. My teacher looked at Derek in the class and said, Derek, that's not nice. And then she looked at me, little 4-year-old me, and said, Amy, please tell your parents that they're saying white wrong. I say white correctly now. Thank you, Miss Danvers. If only I knew that thousands of people on the East Coast say white. Maybe I could have saved myself from years of thinking that I learned English incorrectly. It's weird, when I first started writing this speech, I was convinced that I wouldn't be able to find more than 2 stories like these. If I'm honest, I still tell people that I never experienced any racism growing up. But stories like these are scattered all over my life, like old weeds you get so used to seeing in the back corner of your yard. You ignore them and just say that they're part of the landscape. But slowly but surely, I grew a healthy sense of shame around my ethnicity. The shame wasn't like some loud voice telling me to fight Chineseness at every opportunity. I was Chinese and I offered that information readily. I wasn't refusing to speak Chinese or saying goodbye to my parents a block away before running up to meet my friends. It was more quiet decisions like giving up on correcting people when they say my last name wrong, or always asking for a fork at restaurants. It was easier to treat my ethnicity as an annoyance than try to justify and explain it constantly. To this day, I still pronounce my own last name wrong. For this next part, I need to take a bit of a tangent and talk about my parents. China opened its doors to international adoption in 1992. Like I mentioned, my father was an English professor before immigrating in 1986. My mother was a licensed and practicing attorney when she decided to follow him over. In the US, my mom worked 4 jobs as a janitor, a sales clerk, a waitress, a maid, while she studied to receive her associate's degree. My dad delivered pizzas and worked at a laundromat and call center while he was studying at seminary. We were living on food stamps and donated clothing from the church congregation. When 1992 came around and they saw that China had changed its adoption laws, it was like a lightning bolt went off. Their mother country's lost children needed families, and on whose shoulders should that responsibility lie on if not theirs? They approached adoption agencies nationwide, offering to serve as translators for the new China program. No one responded. And why would they? Two random 20-something-year-old Chinese people just coming up to you saying like, hey, let me help, when they have no knowledge whatsoever of adoption law or practices. I wouldn't have taken their call either. So they did what any reasonable 20-something-year-old person would do after they were met with 15+ rejections. They decided to start their own adoption agency. Now, seriously, this is the decision that still makes me laugh, like just out of pure admiration for their absolute, like for lack of a better term, balls. Like their pure conviction that this was what they were meant to do. I'm going to tie this all in, I promise. When my parents established the agency, they quickly realized that its existence was seen as a sort of mockery. No one would mentor them. No one would work with them. They approached the Chinese American community asking for help, looking for board members or travel agents and translators, anyone who might be able to help their agency succeed and grow. Here again, though, they were met with criticism and rejection, but this time from fellow Chinese Americans sending hate mail and effectively blacklisting them, saying that they were shaming the Chinese community, helping American families adopt Chinese children. So that was that. In one fell swoop, this small international adoption agency managed to piss off everyone they were depending on. The community they thought would swing in and support them shut every door and shuttered the windows. If it hurt my parents, they never let on. I don't remember them ever bad-mouthing their naysayers or caving into threats. If they were listening right now, they'd probably be really upset that I even said anything. They just kept going. My mom continued her studies and received her MBA and JD. My dad finished his seminary studies and began his PhD. And slowly, their adoption agency grew. By 1995, they found families for 100 children. By 2000, they celebrated 2,000 children. By 2012, they had helped find families for over 10,000 children. And they're still going. Like now they're over 13,000 adoptions and have programs for Haiti, Ukraine, Latvia, Bulgaria, Taiwan, Colombia, and the US domestic program. I'll stop bragging about my parents. Here's the point. While I was cultivating my healthy sense of shame, it wasn't just because of scattered comments here and there about how my eyes looked like I was blinking or that I had a good American accent. Much more than these, it was the fact that growing up, I didn't feel any connection to the Chinese American community in Colorado. My family didn't spend time trying to ingratiate ourselves with our fellow Chinese Coloradans because when my parents reached out, they were met with disapproval. And it never sat well with me. Like the fact that this community that was supposed to be my brotherhood could not accept something so simple as finding families for children who had none, while still claiming that they were proud to be Chinese Americans. I didn't understand them. I didn't want to be associated with them. And I knew that that was all anyone that was ever going to see me as. I convinced myself that that was. My family was the only place that I felt comfortable embracing my Chinese heritage. Everywhere else made it feel extremely foreign. My feelings have changed, by the way. I think it's very important to clarify right now. But it took me a long time. It took me going to college in Seattle, meeting and growing close with so many different Asian American individuals who were proud to be Asian American, to actually forgive what I viewed as the Chinese American community at the time for what I felt they did to my family and my parents and the community that I loved so much. With the nature of my parents' work, I got to visit China quite a bit growing up, at least 2 times a year since I was 5 years old. If you're doing the math, I visited China over 50 times in my short lifetime. But these trips were rarely to visit family, and they were never for leisure. Every trip to China that I took growing up was with my parents, accompanying groups of anxious and passionate adoptive parents on their way to meet and hold their children for the first time. That was my China. Beyond the food or the people or the landmarks, my every experience of China was a strange mix of family discovery, anticipation, love, and then also the darker realities of orphanages and child abandonment and starkly contrasting cultures. Every trip would be about the same roller coaster of emotions. I'll take you through it. 18-hour flight into Beijing with 8 to 12 sets of parents, 2 days touring Beijing before the next day flying to their children's province. The next morning is adoption day, and the room is a cacophony of crying and laughing and tears and happy and sad chaos. The next day, the same babies that were crying their heads off yesterday are now just laughing and wearing their parents' favorite sports gear. One more week of adventures with these brand new families, crowds of Chinese people crowding and like looking into the strollers and baby Bjorns, wondering why these white people and what they were doing with these Chinese children. Asking so many questions, taking so many pictures. Flying back home and landing and greeted with a whole mess of camcorders and flowers and stuffed animals and siblings meeting their new baby sisters and brothers for the first time. And more tears and laughter and hugs and happiness. That was my childhood. That was what I loved. And this is what family looked like to me. And this, witnessing American families become united with their Chinese children, was what saved my Chinese American pride. I don't know how else to put it. I was proud to be a part of so many families' stories, proud to witness so many lives change because of the crazy bridge adoption had created between two cultures that in every other aspect of my life were so at odds. I'll show you some pictures right now so this is where I'm gonna break a little bit and say that it was hard to find pictures during this quarantine. A lot of them are at the office, but my mom managed to dig up some. So I have 3, and I'm going to share my screen. Hold on. Share screen. Marcelo and I practiced this before, so look how smooth this is going. Okay, here's, oh, yep. And the doc is not, it's fine. Okay, here's me. Can you see this? Great. So yeah, so this is my childhood. 3 pictures of it among many, many pictures that exist. It's my brother and I. This is my brother right here. Oh gosh, nope, not that one, not a black photo. Okay, this is my brother. This is my brother. We're twins right here. And then these are our trips in China. This was a bus full of adoptive families. Yeah, and this is what I grew up with. So this is us standing in front of Mother's Love Orphanage. Anyway, little photos of my childhood and little me. Okay, all huffy. I can stop sharing that now. Okay, thank you for indulging me. Yeah, but adoption is a strange animal. The brightness and joy of it, the beautiful tears, the transformation, the welcoming home from the forever families are always underlined by gray histories of relinquishments and abandonments and torn histories and unknown, just like endless unknowns. And it's these grayer parts that are hard to process, no matter how much love and joy you surround it with. I learned quickly that the side of adoption that I grew up witnessing, the side that helped stabilize my own identity, the miraculous union of parents and children, the happy tears of siblings and friends, was only the beginning of a much more complex, destabilizing identity journey for the children being fawned over. These children grew up and into a world where race mattered, where skin color is still the first thing that defines you no matter how hard you fight to convince people it's not. In addition to bringing families together and love to a child, adoption also introduces a lifetime of struggling to reconcile things that society isn't built to reconcile. Everyone is raised in their family's values and culture, and that is how you approach the world, right? That's the base of your identity. So generally, you think nothing of it because your inner understanding informs your outer perception. I, with all my unique Chinese American lenses and carefully curated shame, know that the world is going to see me first as an Asian and second, anything else. And that sits okay with me because I am that. Everything I have been raised with is that, Asian, Chinese. It's not untrue. But what if the family values and culture you're raised in, the base of your identity, doesn't prepare you for the outside perception? Like, what if in your family, you're a Jewish Italian? Your name is Grace Bergman. You grow up going to Hebrew school and studying the Torah and the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim. You stand outside and you're still a small Chinese woman. Or maybe your family is 3 generations deep, NC State alumni, roll pack for life. Both your parents are alumni of houses like Kappa Kappa Gamma and Kappa Sig. Your name is Will Preston. And when you step out of your house, you're still just a Chinese man. Here, I do need to add that this is very specific to only a portion of adoptees. If we wanted to dive into the whole gradient of experiences of adoptees, transnational or domestic, closed or open, or designated infant, or older, or foster children, well, that's a whole nother speech. You're gonna have to invite me again some other time. So setting all of those important specifics aside, I hope you understand that I'm speaking generally. So back to our scenarios. You're Grace Bergman or Will Preston, and you step out of your house. Everyone thinks that you can't speak English and you eat dogs. Everyone thinks your Southern accent is super weird. You step on campus, a proud legacy student, and open up your inbox to 10 emails from APIDA, the POC Herald, the Boba and Noodles interest group, and Pi Alpha Phi. And I'm not saying these emails are a bad thing or that they can't be incorporated into your life, because we all know that APIDA is incredibly empowering, shout out. And who doesn't love boba and noodles? Like, are you human? But you step into the world and you are immediately, endlessly assigned to a culture and values and stereotypes that you know nothing about for your entire life. And all of this is just surface level stuff, right? Like, we're not even talking about the added perceptions of adoption that have been perpetuated in the media, or the constant droning threats of childhood trauma studies that people just trying to help keep citing for you. Like, if someone watches Annie or Oliver Twist, or more recently, This Is Us or Little Fires Everywhere, and they think these narratives effectively summarize the vast and infinitely nuanced experiences of you. We started Adopteen because there was an obvious need for support in the young adoptee community. The year before we started, 5 middle school aged adoptees attempted suicide. 2 of them died, middle school. We realized that all of our adopted friends all thought that they were the only adoptee around. isolated and alone in their experiences. And here we were, like, having the same conversations with 20 friends. All of this is simplified a little bit because it was a little bit more complicated. Obviously, we started a nonprofit and it's more complicated. But anyway, we were having the same 20 friends, having the same conversations, and we thought, why not try to introduce them to each other? It seemed like the obvious thing to do. Making it exclusively run and organized and for teenagers also seemed like the obvious thing to do. So that's what we did. Like I said, our first event was a 3-day conference in 2008, and it was attended by 32 teenage adoptees from across the country. It was like fireworks had been released into a gray world. You couldn't get anyone to shut up. And the volume of laughter and sense of ease is still something that defines every Adopteen event to this day. Suddenly, all the realities that came with being adopted, being mistaken for the nanny at family reunions, or weird stares on your birthright Israel trip, or getting stopped at the baseball game while your family walked in with the tickets, or like having belly buttons. They were old news. Like, tell me something exciting, like, what's your favorite music? It was easy and simple. People ask me to describe what Adopteen is, and nothing ever feels like it does it justice. It's a place in the world where being adopted is easy. When I started Adopteen, I was still very much unsure of who I was as a young Asian American woman. And even though I credit a good portion of my personal identity growth to my college years and my travels between China and the US, the truth is that Adopteen is what gave me conviction and affirmation in my personhood. In front of teenage Chinese adoptees looking for bright voices in their world, I had unintentionally forced myself to stand as a confident, steadfast, proud Asian American role model. And even though I was never the one leading the conversation, it often felt like all eyes were on me, not unlike this Zoom meeting. And I didn't want to let anyone down. Adopteen's mission has evolved over these 13 years because I've gotten old. The mission now reads to provide connection, mentorship, leadership, and outreach opportunities for and by adoptees of all ages and histories. We have national and regional conferences and camps, international service trips, mentorship programs, and 11 chapters spread across the United States and Canada. All of our programming, save for the orphanage service trips, which are run by me still, are organized and led entirely by adoptees for adoptees. And not just Chinese adoptees. We're growing into just all adoptees, but that's another different conversation. Our programs have been a part of over 5,000 adoptees' lives, and we're still just getting started. I've dedicated nearly half of my life to the Adopteen community, and I am incredibly proud of what we've built. But no matter how easy Adopteen makes it feel to be an adoptee, it's not sustainable if the rest of the world doesn't know what they're missing. Last year, I established the next step in my nefarious schemes and opened an adoption community center called The Park. Our intention at The Park is to provide intergenerational adoption engagement opportunities through cultural education, family support, place therapy, mentorship, and leadership development for not only the adopted population, but for everyone, in the hopes that through these experiences, we can help bridge the barriers that exist around adoption in our communities. And if nothing else, I guess that's what I hope you walk away with tonight. The understanding that the adopted population deserves a seat at the table, and not a shared seat where half your butt is just like floating and your leg is going numb from pretending that you're fine, but like a full seat, an actual seat, because it doesn't exist right now. I'll close with some nerdy but important numbers. according to the report released by the Asian American Federation in 2014, over 1 in 5 Chinese American girls and 1 in 40 Chinese American boys were adoptees. And this was 2014, right? These are older numbers. But anyway, in this same study, they found that 1 in 10 Chinese and Korean children were adoptees. 72 to 87% of whom were adopted internationally, and the vast majority of whom, 83% for actual numbers, of those adoptees were placed in exclusively white families. That is the world that we live in. That is America. And I think it's time to acknowledge those numbers. My name is Amy. I am a proud Chinese American woman and proud to be part of the Asian American community. And thank you so much for having me. I would love to take some questions if you have any. And if anything that I said was confusing, let me clarify. I also have some photos, but we can share those later. That's it. That's it from me.
Yay, thank you, Amy. We can do a little reaction clap. Mine's little brown hands. I'm really proud of that. But thank you so much. Consider this your standing ovation moment. Woo! Yay!
Thank you.
Oh, wow, amazing.
I will go ahead and think that I got a standing ovation.
You did. Honestly, it's roaring in here, personally. But I did want to give folks space. Yes, see, I saw Adrian's little hands, Ben's little hands. People are clapping in here. It's pretty loud. But I did want to see if folks are interested in chatting with you. There's opportunity here in our chat for y'all to send me questions directly, or if you would like to get unmuted, now is your chance. Fun fact, if you press the space bar, it will unmute you momentarily. And then when you undo the space bar, it'll go back to muting you. So if you want to ask Amy a question right now, this is our chance to kind of reach out and share with her. Anyone want to go first? Or if y'all know how to do the hand raising, also feel free to do that option.
Man, I was so clear in my speech. No one has questions.
Clear and direct.
Amazing.
Right? Well, I actually did have a question. If I can kick it off for all of us. So you mentioned, and I'm really glad that you did. So I'm a pop culture junkie, and I am obsessed.
Nice.
So you even mentioned kind of the newer, like the Annies versus the This Is Us, like all of those narratives. So what, as someone who maybe is newer, like entry level, like still understanding like the adoption world, what are some misconceptions that you see, or like what are some of like the classic like no, not like that kind of moment?
I mean, the thing is, like, you don't want to call them misconceptions, because I think anyone, at least if it's a responsible project, anyone who's writing those stories come from a place of knowledge, right? Like, it's either something that they've experienced personally or anything. But I guess my whole thing is just saying that a lot of those are just very narrowly narrated. They're one person. And I think our main thing in like working with anyone, it doesn't have to be the adopted population, anyone has different opinions, there's different experiences, there's different upbringings. And I think it's interesting to watch people's reactions to any sort of pop culture output about adoption, because it's about something that isn't really familiar to anyone, so any new information is just taken as fact. And I think it's not, I guess, dangerous, but I think it's limiting. So I don't know that it's like, I always think about this, I don't know if Modern Family is still relevant to anyone, but Modern Family was relevant when I was in college, and they had in season 1, right, like they adopt a Vietnamese girl, and they hold it up, like when they bring her home, they hold her up into the spotlight, like Lion King, and it's really comedic and it's nice, but it's also interesting to watch, right? Like I think if that's how adoption is portrayed, it just makes you think a little bit. I don't think it's negative. I think it's still celebratory. I think it's still fun. But I think if I just wish that, or I just hope that a lot of people don't think that that's the only look of adoption, or that that's how adoption works. I don't know. Yeah. So I don't want to say that anything's like a misconception. I think it's just not dangerously, wow. Just underrepresented to a point where any new portrayal is taken at face value when it shouldn't be.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Does any other folks have questions right now? I'm searching. I have to scroll because you got so many participants in here, so I have to make
Oh, yeah.
I did. One person sent me a comment, not a question, but they wanted.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, there it is. They said you delivered your speech so well and that they learned many things, so thank you. Okay, I do have questions now. This is exciting. Okay, first question. How do you feel about issues pertaining to evangelical adoption and the notions of quote unquote white saviorism in the adoption process? Is this something that you feel strongly about? And if you do, how do you address this in your professional and personal life?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and we can have another full speech about that one. Really briefly, I guess, yeah, evangelical. Actually, numbers wise, I will say that like for CCAI, my parents' adoption agency, so I'm just going to speak on what I know. It's still about 97% of the parents who adopt through CCAI are evangelical Christians. And it has only increased with the way that China adoption has changed. Without getting into too much detail, China adoption in the 90s was very much healthy infants, healthy baby girls mostly, but boys also. And then now it has gradually changed due to a lot of factors, due to socioeconomic factors, mostly. China adoption is now adoption of children with severe medical needs. So it changes the population a bit, right? Like in the 90s, you had a lot of parents who were new parents, or who maybe had infertility struggles, and adopting an infant was from China. Like China seemed very easy. And I think now with children with medical needs, severe medical needs, and some of them are much older, then that's a very different population of parents who are able to adopt, right? If they're adopting from China now, they tend to be a little bit more financially capable to take on these burdens. They're maybe already have many children, and they think that they're ready to add another child with that support of that family, and or they're older. There's a lot of things, right? So and there's a religious aspect to it. The idea of it's God's calling to I don't know, save orphans, is a common message. And I think you have a lot of adoption agencies who are Christian-based agencies, and that is what that is the audience. Personally, I think it is a problematic message, obviously, or maybe it's not obvious. I do think if you approach adoption with a savior and then the one being saved, you automatically have a child who feels like they're supposed to be indebted to you, which is just not what it should be like, not a healthy child-parent relationship, and not a healthy way to grow up in general, feeling indebted to anyone. So, yeah, it's a long topic, but I think to sum up, yeah, it's problematic. I do think there are such amazing families that are evangelical Christians who did approach adoption with that aspect, or like that idea in mind, but then quickly realized that maybe that wasn't all that was supposed to be thought through. But yeah, I don't know. That's a very that would be a very fun topic to talk on, I guess. Maybe a podcast or something.
Well, we're ready for the podcast when you are. So thank you for that. And that was sent from one of our students. I didn't know if they wanted me to shout them out, but I thought it was a thoughtful question as well. We do have another question from someone who would like to speak. And so Joyce, if you want to unmute yourself, or I can unmute you and you can ask your question.
Hi, I'm Joyce. I thought it was amazing that you took your parents' passion and you're able to start your own org with your brother. Sorry, I don't know why it's nervous to speak over Zoom. But I guess my question is, like, what do you hope that Adopteen could do for like the future? Even though like it is very relevant now, like what do you hope for it, like for other future generations? I guess that's my question.
What do I hope that Adopteen can do for future generations?
Yeah, like what do you envision for the future? Like, I know you're doing so many amazing works now through Adopteen, but I guess I would really want to see, like, what do you envision for Adopteen in the future?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a very timely question because like I mentioned, we opened up an adoption community center, and I guess that's the next step of what we were hoping to do with Adopteen. When we started Adopteen, it was a very simple kind of innocent agenda, right? Like we wanted, agenda is not the right word, whatever, but a very simple kind of plan for it. We wanted to help our friends, and we wanted to help a community connect so that they didn't feel so alone. But as it went, it kind of became very clear that no matter how comfortable Adopteen felt, everyone would describe it as a breath of fresh air, or they could finally breathe when they were there. It indicated a very desperate need for the world to change around us. Like if you just keep changing in the bubble of Adopteen, it didn't matter, right? Because they're still going to step out of that, and that's still going to be just as damaging or just as lonely without us. And we can't be there all the time, right? Like that's impossible. So that's why we started the park, a community adoption community focused on inviting the outside in, and like making sure that everyone understood that this is a world conversation, not a specific conversation. That it was the responsibility of all of us as Americans, and really as the world, to educate ourselves on what adoption looks like and what adoptee communities look like and what that experience can be like, and how it can be empowering, but also it separates you, and how it's very unique and important to talk about. And I think that's what we were hoping for Adopteen to do, but because we have teen in the Adopteen's name, we realized that we had to do something bigger. So Adoption Community Center, through our Adoption Community Center, we have parenting programs, we have community engagement programs, we have sibling programs, and children of adoptee programs, like all of those, so that we can expand it a little bit more and start inviting people in and really making that conversation flourish and feel, hopefully, or push it hopefully to a point where the world does feel very easy for being adopted, or anyone who's close to adoption, so that adoption doesn't feel like such a stark contrast to everything that is being talked about in pop culture or whatever. So I guess that's the hope for the future, and it's a big hope, right? But I do think it's moving. I think the fact that no matter how narrow these narratives are that I was talking about, the fact that things exist like This Is Us and Modern Family or Little Fires Everywhere or things like that is movement. It's an improvement, because when I was growing up, no one talked about it. No one talked about adoption. It felt like taboo, even though I knew it wasn't, right? Like, so yeah, the park is the future of Adopteen, I guess. Adopteen is a huge part of the park, and but we're going to make Adopteen still focus on the young adult adoptee population mostly, and then we're building in adult adoptee groups separate in the park, and parent groups, and all sorts of exciting things. So yeah, yep, good question. Thanks, Joyce.
That was perfect. Thank you, Amy. We do have a couple more questions, and so I'm gonna, just for the interest of time, say about 2 or 3 more, if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me.
Awesome. And so kind of going off of what you're talking about with the park and kind of how it works with these kind of different levels of communities, we had a few questions around how can first generation Asian Americans be more allies to adoptees and further support them kind of in that journey. So how can folks that maybe don't, similar to you, share the story of adoption, but want to kind of be, supportive and encouraging of that identity development?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think it's the basis of what your whole theme is, right? This year is Our Stories Unraveled, just recognizing that everyone is coming from a different history and a different understanding of themselves. Being Asian is, if you're talking about a Chinese, sorry, I didn't preface my whole speech with, I was specifically talking about the Asian adoptee group, right? Like there are many other adoptees. But if you're talking about how Asian Americans can support, or first gen, second gen, whatever, Asian Americans can support adopted Chinese Americans and Korean Americans and Thai Americans. It's more just recognizing that bonding on like the surface level of like, oh, your parents kept the remote wrapped up too, or like, oh, you had to get the rice ready before your parents got home from work too. Like using that stuff is not welcoming to adoptee populations, right? Like that is not something they grew up with. It's something that they're very curious about though. So don't like hide it, right? Like they want to know that because, and I try to limit how I talk. I don't want to like say like they want this. I'm not an adoptee. I don't know. I'm just standing outside of the house and I know what the color of the house is and like have looked inside the windows, but I'm not the house, right? Like I don't know where. Anyway, but using those like surface level connections, like what I mentioned, tend to feel could feel very like othering, I guess. Like it can feel very strange and like emphasize the difference, right? Emphasize what they missed out on. And I think it shouldn't be structured like that. I think it should always be kind of like a curiosity thing. Like, oh, when I grew up, like this is what I did. And like, these are things that Asian families do that are fun. Like there's a balance of like, they can educate, like I've learned so much more about American culture from my adoptee friends than like my white American, like quote unquote white friends, right? Like they've taught me so much because you have some sort of like shared Venn diagram. And you can do the same for them. Like there is something about your life that is very shared for them that they want to learn about. But I think also recognizing that there is differences that should be thought about before, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that wasn't very articulate, but I think at the end of the day, it's really just recognizing that everyone has their own experiences to share, things to learn from each other, and they're curious about Asian culture, like true Asian culture, and but they're also wanting to stand and like with 2 feet on the ground with their own culture, their adopted culture. And I think that's very important to acknowledge.
Right. And I feel like kind of even to your analogy here of like the house and the windows and looking, like I think that this is kind of brought into this next question that we received, where you being kind of this bridge between, right, like you yourself having that Asian American lens and family, but also being so closely with the adoptee community. Was there ever a moment where you doubted yourself in your career because you weren't adopted, and kind of what that like double consciousness moment of like awareness was for you?
Totally. Yeah, I think my brother and I talk about it a lot, and my brother is now not as active in Adopteen as he used to be, but we when we started Adopteen, we had a very strong conviction that it needed to be led and directed, and everything that was happening had to be led and directed by adoptees, because we didn't know, right? Like, it's the whole house thing. We didn't know. We just had the connections and the resources to be able to start it. But as we were going, I think there was a weird clarity of my voice in it, I guess. My brother and I shared the same upbringing, but we were brought up in adoption in a very unique way, right? Like, I don't think there is anyone else who had Chinese parents working in the adoption field. Like, I don't know any other Chinese American who had my upbringing. And I think witnessing that side of it, and witnessing the work of adoption and the parents and that change and that process, but also then being friends and growing up with adoptees as a norm, gave us a very unique, I think, window into a lot of things. I think a lot of our friends at Adopteen have a lot of questions about their history, have a lot of questions about just the process of adoption, just really basic things that, like, their parents never thought about bringing up because it's not important. Like, what paperwork did you fill out to or like, how did you find your adoption agency, and like, what was that? Like, no one asks that because, like, it's paperwork. But I realized that for a lot of friends and Adopteen, that was important because their history is so blank, right? Like, there's so much unknown and just a blank slate. So any information that you can throw at it is helpful and is more stabilizing. So I realized that, like, we aren't social workers. I'm not an adoption professional, right? Like, my perspective was more aligned with watching my adopted friends grow up and understanding what their struggles were and what their parents weren't doing, or where that gap existed between the parents' understanding and the kids, because we also grew up very close with their parents. So I guess that's where we straddled. I think that's the balance that we started making sure we set, because I realized that there were a lot of answers that I guess I could lend to or offer that weren't being answered by the other adoptees in the population, because they didn't know either, right? Like, they're always searching. And so if someone's out there that actually knows, then, like, why not discuss that and offer that? So I guess that's where I stand.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And I, in regards to you sharing more about your family and your own family story and narrative, someone did want to know, in regards to adoption, did your family ever make headway with the Chinese American community?
Oh, yes. So the Chinese American community did come around. I'm just kidding. No, the Chinese American community and the Zhong family we're all good. CCAI has a cultural school, and all of the teachers are native Chinese teachers. So we had, right, like, that's a very important part of cultural education and cultural support for Chinese adoptees. So yeah, that was long. It was just history that I was sharing. After a while, it was all water under the bridge, and everyone's on board. But yeah, it was just a weird time, I guess.
For sure. I mean, they were listening, you know, they wanted to know the details. The tea was hot, so thank you for sharing.
I'm happy to spill the tea. No, well, anyway, my thought disappeared, but
That's cool. Well, those were the end of the questions that I had in the chat. Was there anyone else that had anything they wanted to ask Amy directly? I know we are
I do have some questions in my private inbox.
Oh, wonderful.
Thanks, Hannah, for thanking me. My question stems from being Chinese American in general. Is there a right way or a better way to react when individuals of Asian descent experience racism as a result of the COVID pandemic? You can't avoid COVID, you know? Is there a right way or better way to react? when individuals of Asian descent experience racism. See, this is where I think I'm not an authority, you know. I am also Asian American. Like, I have friends who have also experienced racism due to the current pandemic, and I don't know what the right way is. I think yeah, I I would love answers too. I think the instinct is to be angry and feel shame, but I think also recognizing that those people that are doing it and like enacting that racism is not a comment on you, and is more of a comment on what they believe and what they're doing, but that doesn't have to have a weight on what you're doing and what you believe in and what you know yourself to be. Yeah, I don't know. I think just practice kindness all the time, and know who you are. Like, know that none of that actually matters, like resounds with you, I guess. I don't know. It's a harder question. Ask me something about adoption. No, okay. What else?
I did have some comments if you wanted to hear those, or if you had more questions in your DMs.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, perfect. I did have a message from Mina, who just wanted to share her thanks and her gratitude for you, being able to realize the history of Adopteen and how transformative and how important it was for all the thousands of lives out there. So another comment of gratitude and thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I will say that now Adopteen, all of our Adopteen programming is, I'm kind of just like a ghost chair, I guess. Like, it's mostly directed by our program coordinators at the park now. So all of the programming, all of the committees, all of the things are not on my plate. I'm just hanging around doing other things. But Adopteen is still very much the heart of everything that we're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone that was here joining us virtually. I think we peaked at about 45 folks that were joining us at the same time. So Amy, you brought the heat. It was great. So thank you all the way from Colorado to here. I want to give you another round of applause. And so putting up my little emoji hands, but.
Oh my gosh, I just saw that my two program coordinators are here.
Oh, wonderful.
Allie, Claire, say hi. No, you don't have to. Okay.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, see?
Hello.
They're real. Well,
Do you guys want to say anything?
Yes, please.
Allie, do you want to say anything?
I can't see myself. Is my video on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so there's always a lot of opportunities to get involved in Adopteen. You can just email us and we can give you more information. But we definitely want to invite not just adoptees into the conversation, because like Amy mentioned throughout her speech, we're hoping to broaden it a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, Allie.
Yeah.
Thanks, Allie. I didn't mean to call you guys out of the blue. I just saw your names and I got excited.
Awesome. Amy, if folks wanted to follow up with you with questions, is it okay for me to share your email with everyone, or how can they best get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can share my email. My email is amy@theparkcenter.org or amy@adopteen.org. Either of those work. You can also follow the park on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok at the park community. I think on TikTok it's @_the park community _, so it's very important. TikTok. And then Adopteen is also on Instagram and Facebook, and that's just @Adopteen. But yeah, feel free to email me any questions, any clarifying notes, any critique. This is the first, remote speech that I've ever done. It's the first speech that I've done for a university. So I'm truly honored that you trusted me with this.
Oh no, the pleasure
Very
and
nerve-wracking.
definitely all ours. And thank you again, Sarah. She was the one who actually participated in one of your trips as an adoptee herself.
High five.
Yes, and was really excited to share kind of, again, this unraveled part of the Asian experience. And so thank you so much to you and Sarah and the whole committee for this year's APIDA Heritage Month. I know this was not how we were planning on doing any of our programs, but you all still showed up today, and I really, really deeply appreciate your commitment, your participation, and so I hope that we're able to do some more. And so on that note, next week, just as a little quick announcement, we are hosting 2 more events in honor of APIDA Heritage Month. Next, we're still finalizing whether it's Monday or Tuesday. We're going to do a kind of anti-model minority study tips, and so talking about being Asian Americans, academic success, and kind of the stressors that come around with it. It's going to be hosted by a good friend of mine named Reena Gupta, and so she will be sharing her experience as a South Asian woman. And then on Thursday night, she will be coming back, but this time teaching us how to do a Bhangra Bollywood dance. So you all can do this at home. You all can join us, and so all of you are welcome. Again, it's free. It's something that we're excited to share with you all. So more details will be coming out, and so that's happening next week. But again, thank you all so much. This is a part of our APIDA Heritage Month, and so I hope you all continue to celebrate the beauty that is around you, about our stories being unraveled, and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.